When people think of car manufacturing, Detroit usually comes to mind. But did you know Massachusetts has a rich and often overlooked automotive history that stretches back to the 19th century? This past weekend, the Bay State Motor Festival set out to highlight that legacy, showcasing vehicles built across the state, including right here in Framingham. I'm Lilia Cormack, and this is the Frame by Frame.
You know, this is where it all began, really.
Massachusetts was the genesis of the automobile in America.
Back in 1893, brothers Frank and Charles Duryea created the first gasoline-powered American automobile a little over an hour away in Springfield.
From that time on, Springfield became one of the leading manufacturing centers in the first 2 decades of the 1900s.
And it wasn't just Springfield. Vehicles were being manufactured all over the state.
It turns out there were 162 different manufacturers of vehicles in Massachusetts before the Second World War.
Ken didn't even know about this legacy until he stumbled upon a 1924 Bay State sedan and learned that history was even more local than he realized. Richard Long was passing through Framingham on a train and saw a factory for rent. He got off at the next stop, walked back to Framingham, and signed a lease that day. Long initially made shoes, but during World War I, he shifted to producing military equipment like saddlebags and gun belts. When the war ended, so did his government contract, but he still employed about 20% of the population.
So he had to make something, because he can't just have all of these people hanging around saying, "Okay, boss, now what?"
Seeking a new venture, he bought a car body business from Amesbury and relocated it to Framingham. He produced car bodies for Winton and Franklin before deciding to create his own vehicle. That's when the Bay State Auto Company was born. It's estimated that 4,000 Bay State automobiles were sold. Now, a century later, there are only 2 left in the world, and Ken found one of them in Iowa. It was in pretty rough shape.
So we got the car. It was kind of a car. It wasn't really a car.
Restoring the car required years of dedication and meticulous attention to detail, just like organizing this motor festival, which was named in honor of the automobile. So with the Bay State celebrating its 100th birthday and the city marking its 325th year, cake was more than appropriate.
Happy birthday to you.
And though many appreciated the Bay State's historical significance to Framingham, for one guest, the connection was much more personal.
It's a pleasure to meet you, sir.
Nice to meet you. He owns the Bay State.
Yes,
He restored it.
That's Richard Long's grandson, Charles.
Beautiful.
After visiting the last remaining Bay State Roadster a few years ago, Charles assumed he would never see one of his grandfather's cars ever again. That changed at Sunday's event.
You could see that when he saw the car, he was younger all of a sudden.
Although the Bay State was the event's namesake, plenty of other antique cars from across Massachusetts were also featured, including some that even predate the 100-year-old sedan.
How old is this car?
114, yeah. I'd like to do half as well when I get to be 114.
Of all those antique cars, Ken says about half of them actually drove onto the field.
The Farnham and Nelson bodied locomobile, the Knox cars, the Indian motorcycles, the Stanley steamers, the Metz cars, the Orients, all of these different vehicles were all made here in Massachusetts.
The state's role in early automotive evolution was on full display, and Framingham's place in that rich history doesn't end with the Bay State. Richard Long's manufacturing business eventually went bankrupt, leading him to open one of the country's first General Motors dealerships, a move that helped sustain Framingham's role in the automotive industry for decades. That decision is widely credited with motivating GM to establish a manufacturing plant in Framingham.
Yeah, the GM plant was built immediately after the Second World War in 1946. They broke ground and they were there until 1989.
The town of Framingham becomes the center of interest for all Massachusetts as this progressive community is selected by the great automotive industry for the location of its first big assembly plant in New England.
Over 4.5 million cars were built in that plant.
My father and my brother and myself all worked at the Framingham plant. I worked on GTOs, Pontiac Le Manses, Oldsmobile Cutlasses, Chevrolets.
By 1989, the GM plant had closed, ending car production in Framingham. But the spirit of innovation that began a century ago remains an important part of the city's history. The Motor Festival offered an opportunity for both the Framingham and Massachusetts automotive legacies to shine.
The most difficult thing that I've found is that if you don't realize the history, it gets by you and you don't learn from it. So I think my favorite part of the event was just bringing history to light that people have never seen.
And whether they came from just down the street or all the way from Bar Harbor, Maine, each car found its way to its home state.
We're always happy to bring a car home to the state that it came from.